A couple of times we have asked him, but he always says, no, that's not what I do now.
Queen, a legend of sound and spectacle. Their name alone conjures images of Freddie Mercury's electrifying stage presence and Brian May's soaring guitar solos. But the band's true foundation, its quiet anchor, was a man who chose to fade into the silence. John Deacon, the enigmatic bassist and co-creator of some of their most iconic hits, walked away from the limelight in 1997, leaving behind a legacy as powerful as it was mysterious. Now, for the first time, a startling revelation from Brian May at 73 sheds light on the truth behind Deacon's disappearance. This isn't a simple tale of rock and roll. It's a profound narrative of loss, steadfast loyalty, and the resonant silence that still defines Queen's heart. The invisible engine, Queen's music was an unstoppable force, a tidal wave of sound that filled stadiums, dominated airwaves, and became the soundtrack for generations. Their songs, a blend of fiery passion and theatrical bravado, became permanent fixtures in the cultural pantheon. Yet, as the cheers grew louder and the crowd swelled, one essential figure slowly retreated from view, leaving behind a void that fans have been trying to fill for decades. John Deacon, the quiet architect of Queen's most memorable bass lines, deliberately stepped back from his role in 1997. It wasn't a public spectacle or a dramatic farewell. Instead, it was a deliberate, almost imperceptible withdrawal from a world he no longer wished to inhabit. He was the pulsing rhythm behind Another One Bites the Dust, a groove that became an anthem for an entire generation. He was the melodic soul of You're My Best Friend, a song that still feels as intimate and personal as a whispered secret. Yet after years of unimaginable success, he simply vanished. For years, fans speculated, desperate to understand the motivation of a man who seemed to have deliberately erased himself from the history he helped write. There were no John Deacon interviews, no public appearances, and no participation in reunion tours. Even the Oscar-winning film Bohemian Rhapsody in 2018, which brought Queen to a new generation, felt his conspicuous absence. Then, a stunning confession from Brian May, now in his 70s, broke the years of silence. In a recent interview, May shared, "He is never gone. He's just not here. When we ask him for something important, we get his blessing, or we don't." These words were more than just a confirmation of Deacon's continued involvement. They were a lifeline thrown into a sea of unanswered questions, suggesting a man who, though physically absent, remained a silent guardian of Queen's legacy. May's admission sent shockwaves through the fan community, reigniting conversations that had long since been given up on. What was the true reason for his retreat? What was he protecting? And from what? What was the true cost of fame for Queen's enigmatic bassist, the quiet artisan? John Richard Deacon's journey was never one destined for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame spotlight. Born in Leicester, England, on August 19, 1951, he grew up far from the glitz and clamor of the stage. He was a child of quiet fascination, not theatrical spectacle. While his peers played sports, Deacon was drawn to the intricate world of electronics. His childhood bedroom was a workshop of disassembled radios, meticulously reconstructed amplifiers, and homemade circuit boards. He was a hybrid of artist and engineer, finding a seamless harmony between the worlds of technology and music. As a teenager, he was equally comfortable holding a soldering iron as a bass guitar, building soundscapes and electrical currents with the same dedicated passion. When he joined Queen in 1971, the band was a maelstrom of colossal personalities. Freddie Mercury was a hurricane of charisma, Roger Taylor was the thunderous pulse, and Brian May was the cerebral, virtuoso guitarist. But they were missing a key element, an anchor. They needed someone to ground their immense creative ambitions and provide a steady foundation for their artistic flights of fancy, beyond his reserved exterior. Deacon was a quiet force of stability, pragmatic, deeply loyal presence that kept the band from flying apart. But his quiet nature should not be mistaken for a lack of creativity. Some of Queen's most beloved and enduring hits bear his signature. You're My Best Friend was a tender tribute to his wife, Veronica, a song That showed a gentle, heartfelt side of the man. I Want to Break Free was a brilliant lyrical statement disguised as a pop anthem. Deacon never craved the spotlight. He was content to be the unseen engine, the silent power source that drove Queen's immense machine. Yet, no one could have foreseen how abruptly that engine would stop. The four pillars. Queen was never just a collection of musicians. It was a complex, delicate alchemy of four distinct personalities, each bringing an indispensable element to the mix. Freddie Mercury, the flamboyant frontman, was the theatrical chaos, his voice and stage presence a magnetic spectacle. Roger Taylor, with his unrelenting energy, was the band's driving heartbeat. Brian May, the thoughtful scientist, provided the soaring, technically brilliant artistry. And then there was John Deacon, a figure who operated on his own terms, often in the background, but utterly vital. Unlike his bandmates, Deacon rarely spoke to the media. He recoiled from the glare of fame, preferring the quiet sanctuary of his own world to the relentless spotlight. Yet, his influence behind the scenes was profound. When Queen's sound was still finding its form, it was Deacon's arrival that completed the sonic puzzle, allowing the band to evolve from a hard rock group into a pop rock behemoth that captured the world's attention. Deacon's genius was twofold. He was both a masterful songwriter and an inventor. His songs often had a lighter, more accessible feel that made them perfect for radio. One of his most legendary contributions was the creation of the DC amp, an amplifier he built from a discarded circuit board. This unassuming invention became the secret weapon behind Brian May's unmistakable guitar harmonies, the rich, layered and instantly recognizable tone that defined Queen for decades. As Queen's fame exploded, Deacon seemed to recede further into the shadows. He didn't thrive. In the chaotic world of sold-out stadiums and red carpet premieres, he preferred the quiet of a recording studio or the solitude of his home workshop. This wasn't shyness. It was a deliberate act of self-preservation. It was this quiet strength, this tendency to operate behind the scenes, that foreshadowed his eventual retreat into silence. While his bandmates reveled in the glory of superstardom, John Deacon was quietly, methodically cementing Queen's legacy, all while preparing to vanish from the public eye. Deacon was the band's emotional linchpin. He was the calm in the storm, the steady presence who could temper Freddie Mercury's artistic outbursts and Roger Taylor's fiery temper. In doing so, he absorbed the band's collective stress like a sponge, taking on an emotional burden that others refused to carry. This calm wasn't apathy. It was a deep emotional well, a quiet force that sustained the band's fragile equilibrium. But even emotional sponges have a breaking point. When Freddie Mercury was diagnosed with AIDS and then died in 1991, the dam finally broke for John Deacon. The man who had long borne the silent weight of the band's internal turmoil fractured in a way that no one could have seen coming. The loss of Freddie was more than the loss of a bandmate. It was the loss of a brother, a creative partner, and the one person who kept Deacon connected to the chaos of fame. In the wake of Mercury's death, Deacon's retreat wasn't just about grief, it was about survival. He withdrew from the band, the spotlight, and the life that had once defined him. As Brian May would later reflect, John never sought attention, but when he disappeared, it felt like Queen's heart had stopped beating. His silence spoke louder than words, quiet farewell to a world that had once meant everything to him. His bond with Freddie. Freddie Mercury was a force of nature, flamboyant, magnetic, and unapologetic. His stage presence was a spectacle. Larger than life, a dazzling showman who turned performance into high art. But behind that public persona was a deep, complex friendship with John Deacon, the quiet, introspective heart of Queen. John was Freddie's polar opposite in almost every way. Where Freddie craved the limelight, John preferred the shadows. Where Freddie was an explosion of energy, John was a quiet reservoir of thoughtful silence. Yet, it was these very differences that forged an unbreakable bond, a connection built on trust, respect, and a shared understanding that went beyond music. Freddie trusted John implicitly. He celebrated John's songwriting successes with genuine enthusiasm. Whether it was the groundbreaking "Another One Bites the Dust" or the understated "Spread Your Wings," Freddie's encouragement gave John the confidence to create, even though he was the most reserved member of the band. In the constant frenzy of touring and press, Freddie became a protector, shielding John from the relentless glare of the media. In Freddie's orbit, John felt safe enough to create, to be vulnerable. And in return, John offered Freddie something invaluable: unconditional companionship without pretense. There were no theatrics, no need to perform off stage. With John, Freddie could simply be himself. But when Freddie Mercury died, that sanctuary was shattered. The loss was a seismic rupture that shook John to his core. His world, once anchored by his closest friend, was now adrift. In the aftermath, John tried to hold on to the pieces. He played at a few tribute concerts, his hands trembling over the bass as memories flooded back. He helped finish the album Made in Heaven, lending his touch to complete the music Freddie had left behind. But it was never the same. The vital energy that had fueled Queen was gone. The glue had come undone. Brian May later said it bluntly. Freddie's death hit John the hardest. He just couldn't find a reason to go on in that world. The man who had helped define Queen's sound was now lost in a grief so profound it eclipsed everything else. The most haunting testament to his despair was a private statement, uttered with a quiet finality. "Without Freddie, it's not Queen. It's just noise." That declaration marked the beginning of a silence that would grow into a profound, permanent withdrawal from the world. When the music stopped, by 1997, the remaining members of Queen came together to record No One But You. Only the Good Die Young, a final tribute to Freddie Mercury. John Deacon agreed to participate. He returned to the studio, a place heavy with memories. He played the bass with his usual meticulous care, but this time his fingers carried the weight of profound loss. He wept during the sessions, mourning not just a friend, but the life and music they had all shared. When the song was finished, it felt like a final act, a closing chapter. For John, it was more than just a song. It was the end of an era. He left the studio and walked away, never to return. There was no official announcement, no press release, just silence. His bandmates understood. They knew that Mercury's death had taken a toll unlike any other, and that John's retreat was deeper than grief. It was a permanent withdrawal from a world that had once defined him. In the years that followed, Queen continued in various forms. Brian May and Roger Taylor toured and released new music. The Queen legacy endured, but John Deacon vanished. He refused interviews and declined to speak publicly, even when offered millions to appear at the premiere of the Live Aid film. He politely refused. He chose to live a quiet life, far from the spotlight. Living in silence, in a quiet, unassuming suburb of London, John Deacon has built a life that is almost unrecognizable to the public. Behind the modest door of his home, one of rock's most revered figures lives a life of remarkable normalcy and privacy. His wife Veronica remains his steadfast companion. Their 6 children grew up shielded from the whirlwind of fame, knowing their father's rock star identity as a whispered legend, not a headline. Neighbors speak of him in hushed tones, respecting the invisible boundary he has drawn around his life. He shuns the glamour of his past, avoids red carpets, and declines autograph requests with polite firmness. Yet, despite his retreat from the public eye, John Deacon's influence within the Queen enterprise remains powerfully alive. Every major decision regarding the band's catalog, from licensing to film rights, still requires his approval. Though he no longer speaks to fans or the media, Deacon still communicates with his former bandmates through letters, legal representatives, and private calls. He doesn't involve himself in day-to-day matters, but when the band's legacy is at stake, his voice is heard. Brian May recently shed light on this unique arrangement. John's not gone. He's just not here. When we ask him something important, we get his blessing, or we don't. Then came the unexpected newsa moment that underscored the power of John's quiet presence. Brian May finally spoke. After decades of silence from the enigmatic bassist, May, now 73, stepped forward in a private interview. His words cut through the fog of speculation that had long surrounded Deacon's withdrawal. For years, people thought John was completely out of the picture. May began, his tone resolute. But he's still involved every step of the way. This wasn't the distant exit everyone assumed. Deacon remained a quietly powerful force, his influence subtle but absolute. May revealed that during the monumental $1 billion sale of Queen's music catalog, Deacon's approval was not just sought, but essential. His nod could greenlight a project. His veto could bring it to a screeching halt. May's words painted a picture of Deacon as a silent guardian of the band's legacy, protecting its integrity without fanfare. We get messages that he's happy with what we're doing, May added with a small smile. But he doesn't want the stress of being involved creatively, and we respect that. The weight of maintaining the band's legacy had clearly taken its toll on Deacon, who chose distance over the limelight. May then made a profound analogy. "Freddie, we can't talk too sadly," he said softly, "but the four of us worked as a team. For so long, it's like a marriage. Longer even." Queen, in May's eyes, was still a brotherhood, a family bound by decades of triumphs and tragedies. In that family, even John Deacon's silence was a voice loud enough to be heard. Even now, Queen is still a band of four, May implied, suggesting that John's unseen presence remained a deeply woven part of their collective identity. The shocking truth. Then came the moment that truly shook fans to their core revelation. May had held close for years. "John doesn't speak publicly," May began, his voice heavy with importance. "But when it's important, he speaks privately. And once when something big was on the table, he simply said no. And that was it. It didn't happen." The pause that followed was filled with meaning. This was no casual disagreement, but a decisive boundary drawn by Deacon that altered the course of Queen's future. May's words highlighted a truth often overlooked. John's silence was not an absence. His silence is not absence. It's presence. Expressed differently, Brian explained. For John's presence was a quiet guardianship, a vigilant protection of Queen's soul. Then, with a somberness that filled the room, May offered the most intimate glimpse into Deacon's heart. "I think John's withdrawal was his way of grieving, of honoring Freddie, of keeping Queen real. He couldn't keep playing the songs without the man who gave them life. It was an emotional reckoning, a truth about loyalty and profound loss." John had seen the band change after Freddie Mercury's death, but he refused to let it become something unrecognizable. The music was more than just notes. It was Freddie's essence, and without him, John felt the songs had lost their heartbeat. Looking back, May would later admit that John had sensed something they hadn't fully grasped at the time, a wisdom born from pain. Then, May recalled a turning point that few outside their circle ever knew about. "Years ago," he said, "someone had tried to steer Queen in a direction that felt wrong to all of them, a pivotal moment where the band's identity hung in the balance." May's voice dropped to a near whisper. John was the first to speak, and he said it without hesitation. He said he was disgusted, and he was right. The bluntness of that statement was shocking, but it cut through all ambiguity. "That one decision saved us," May concluded, the gravity of the moment unmistakable. The final stunning truth. John Deacon may have disappeared from the public eye, but he never truly left Queen. His spirit, his unwavering judgment, and his fierce loyalty remain etched into the band's legacy. He is a quiet, unyielding force that continues to shape the story of one of rock's greatest bands. If you had to choose between legacy and peace, which would you protect? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.